This is the Wholesome Orator, faith, food, lessons learned, Black Greek life. Thanks for returning. Welcome if it's your first time. Let's begin. For me, I got to the point where there were only certain kinds of coffee that I ended up liking. And when I say different kinds, not necessarily brands, but like types of coffee. So coffee, because it's grown, it tastes different in different places with different soil, with different climates or seasons and things like that. Much like people, some people might drink wine and they like certain wines from certain places and that kind of thing, and how the taste changes. Cigars are the same thing, because obviously it's a crop, it's a tobacco, and so depending on the nutrients in the soil and the location in the world that it's grown, and you have a different taste. If you're I ended up falling in love with Sumatra. It's grown in Indonesia. So in Indonesia they grow it, and it has like kind of a sweet taste that also has a little bit of smoky, but it's probably earthy, so more earthy and sweet, with a little bit of kind of woody taste to it or whatever. So and so I can pretty much go anywhere and say, okay, this is what I want, or these are the kind of beans I want, because most places don't always have Sumatra for you to drink on hand. Sometimes they do, but it's kind of seasonal, or I don't know. They usually try to go with something safe. So with all that said, I'm going to run through some of the ways to drink coffee, or the types of coffee, because that's something I wanted to know when I wasn't drinking coffee. But before I get into that, there are 3 different kinds of ways to make coffee. One is drip coffee, which is just like you make at home with a coffee pot, and you got a filter and all that, and it drips in hot water, boiling hot kind of steamy water, and you have that. Then there's pour over. Pour over, it's kind of in a glass flask looking thing, and you have a filter, but you have to like fold the filter yourself and put it into the glass funnel, and a person that knows what they're doing has to slowly drizzle the hot water over it, not in the same place, but just moving it around the filter and the coffee, because the coffee grounds are in there. I don't remember if it's fine or coarse or just kind of in between. Drip coffees, more fine, but not as fine as some other like Turkish coffees and stuff, but that's a whole different world. So the issue that I have with pour over coffee is you have to figure out how to do it and what works best for you to get the taste that you want. And people don't ask for it too often in coffee houses, and so it tastes different. So it's a thing where my experience is that I started drinking coffee on a regular basis, and I would take my coffee beans, grind them myself, and do a French press. And so French press it's kind of like I don't know, like a flask with a filter in it that plunges down. And so you take coarsely ground coffee beans and you put them in the bottom of it. And I'll show it to you because I'm going to make a video about it. But at the bottom, you have the coffee. You take the boiling water, you pour it into the coffee grounds, and then you put this filter over it, like inside. And some people plunge it all the way down and let it sit for 3 minutes. I don't tend to do that. I'll stop the plunger like right where the water stops, and just let it sit for 3-4 minutes. And then when I go to pour it, I'll push it all the way down because it has a spout on it. So you push it all the way down to keep the ground coffee beans in the bottom to filter it out. It's a screen. And you just pour it and you have your coffee. So that is how I started drinking coffee every day, because it gets to the point where you figure out exactly how much of the coffee beans that you want, how you want to ground it. It has to be coarse, but you may have some flexibility of like a little less coarse, a little bit more coarse. How long you let it sit. Coffee's not as finicky as tea when you're talking about seeping it. So, you can let it sit in there for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes if you want. I have started doing something and then gone back and poured it, and it didn't change the taste too much. When you're at home, if you drink coffee, you drink sugar and milk or cream with your coffee, you just end up just kind of toying with it until you get the right taste that you want. And I weigh stuff, but I was losing weight, and I don't like sugar substitutes, and especially in coffee, like, because it changes the taste. It's not, sugar tastes like sugar. It is sweet, but it has a flavor. Agave is okay. That's not bad. But then all other kinds of sweeteners, it really changes the taste too much for me. And so yeah, like when I did sugar, I actually weighed the sugar. I weighed my coffee, the coffee grind. How much do I put in? I think it's 8 grams or something like that. So I grind up 8 grams, and that's what I do every time. And I use bottled water, so I use roughly the same amount of water every time. It's less than a bottle of water. Bottled water is 16.9 ounces. So I can kind of eyeball it, because in the French press, I stop it around the same level every single time. So I got it down to a science. But as I started losing weight and started cutting back on sugar, I ended up going and taking less and less out. And after a while, I was just like, it don't even make a difference. Like, the little bit of sugar that was in there, I couldn't taste it. So if I can't taste it, why even put it in there? So I drink coffee black, and that makes a difference. Like, if you put a whole lot of cream and sugar in your coffee, like, you may not be able to tell the difference between high end, like high quality coffee, or not, or a certain kind of coffee, like a Ethiopian coffee, or anywhere else, like you just, if it has too much of other stuff in it, of course it probably will taste different, but yeah, I just don't do that. Too much milk in it, acts like a laxative to me. And like I said, I stopped putting sugar in it. Sometimes, every now and then I do some sugar in it, but not on a regular basis, because my taste buds have gotten used to it. And I always wonder, like, how do people drink coffee without sugar? But once you get used to it, it's really good, and it really makes a difference. You can really taste what you want to taste, and it's not nasty. But you've got to know you have to know what you want, and perhaps make it yourself. All right, so that's kind of the beginning to the coffee story. But what happened with me, I ended up going and drinking my own coffee so long that I went to a national coffee chain. I mean, maybe I'll name names later, but there's no need. I go to a national coffee chain, and I'm like, give me a coffee. They gave me a regular drip coffee, which is fine, but it didn't taste good to me. So I thought, okay, well, maybe it's because I always drink Sumatra, and so everything else, or I drink Sumatra and sometimes French roast, and I can't think of the name. Starbucks makes a coffee bean that I drink, but I can't think of what it is. So maybe I'll put it in the description or something. And so I'm like, man, like it just doesn't taste good. And then, if this national coffee chain didn't taste good, going to, fast food restaurant or a gas station or a breakfast spot just wouldn't be the thing that I wanted to do. So it wasn't. I was like, if they can't make it, or if they make something that I don't like, these other places that don't specialize in coffee isn't going to be good. So that's all it was. That's how it happened. I'm like, okay, so I got to do something else. So that's when I started researching other things, and that's how I found out about pour over. So then I go to the national coffee chain again. I'm like, hey, can you do a pour over? And they're like, yeah, we can do a pour over, but it's a set price because you use a set amount of water and coffee grinds and things like that. And so it doesn't come in different sizes. And so they'll give it to you. They'll give it to you in a cup, like the largest cup, like the 20-ounce cup. But then there'll be some more extra, and they'll put that in a little cup too if you want extra. So I see them kind of talking, and the body language says, hey, who's the pour over guy? Do you know how to do pour overs? Or, I don't have experience. Have the manager do it, pour over or whatever. So like, I don't know what they said, but the body language definitely was like, who's going to do this? And so I was like, great. So they do the pour over. I have to pull over, by the way, because it takes time. Like I said, pour over, you're slowly pouring hot water into the coffee grounds, and it's being filtered out. And it's kind of tedious. Takes a little, some time and stuff. But some people do it because they They say it's much cleaner. Um, you just throw the filter away, and the glass is pretty much clean already. But I don't have one, so I couldn't say. So then I got that, and I was like, it was like super bitter. And my experience with coffee, it gets bitter if it's ground too much. And so I'm thinking like one of two things is happening here. Either it's ground too much, too finely, or they didn't know how to pour it, and maybe they poured it too fast, too slow, didn't move it around enough. I don't know. I'm no expert in that. So I said, okay, all right, I'll give them another try. So later on, I gave a different restaurant, same chain, different restaurant, the same thing, and it didn't taste as bitter, but it didn't taste the same, and even though there was the same coffee. And at that point, I was just fed up because I'm like, nah, like I make coffee better at home for cheaper. So, why pay money for somebody else to do it, and it's not that great. Now, the coffee from like real coffee houses, I don't want to say real coffee houses that get their beans shipped to them and they roast them like roasters. Now, their drip coffee is good. But I said, okay, well, I do a French press at home, and these popular restaurants or coffee houses, they don't do French press. That not of my knowledge. They do pour overs, they do drip, and then of course they do everything that has espresso in it. So I started researching, well, what can I get with espresso that kind of is along the same lines of what I drink. And I fell across Americanos. So the first coffee drink that I'm talking about is Americanos, outside of French press and pour over and drip, because all of these other coffees, when you ask for coffee in certain kinds of ways, it's the base of it is espresso. And so I said, okay, Americano, what is that? I look it up. Well, I found it while looking at coffees and ways of eating coffee, drinking coffee. And it's espresso, which and espresso is nothing but very, very, very condensed coffee with little water. And so the water is almost boiling, but it's not to the temperature of boiling, and it's pressurized in the machine. So pressurized hot water gets pushed out into freshly ground coffee grounds. So it's basically super, super strong coffee. And I forget, I think that's it's finely ground too. Whereas French press is coarse. But anyway, Americano it's partly the espresso, and then mostly like steaming hot water to it to dilute it. So essentially what happened was, in World War II, you had army or soldiers over in Europe, and they'd go get a cup of coffee, which is espresso. You get this little cup of with an espresso shot in it, and they didn't like it because they're not used to it. Americans aren't. because Americans basically mostly drink just regular drip coffee. And so they started asking for hot water to be added so that they can dilute it. And with the dilution, it made it to where where they could drink it and it tastes good. It tastes familiar. Well, when I go to anywhere that sells Americanos, that's what I get. I don't get a drip coffee. I don't get a pour over. I get an Americano because it tastes fresh. Like, it tastes fresher, and it's very close, if not exact, to French press coffee. So, it's if you ever get in a situation where you make French press coffee at home and you're out and about, you can't make coffee, or you're traveling or something, pick Americano, and it'll taste just as good. On the flip side, there's also a coffee called a long black. So a long black is pretty much the same thing as an Americano. The difference is, instead of adding water to the espresso, you have steaming hot water, and then the espresso gets put in it. And from what I understand, like, I haven't had it, but it tastes the same, because essentially it is the same. The only difference is you have this kind of chemical thing going on where, like, you can tell the difference by looking at it. There's like a releasing of carbon dioxide or something, where you have the espresso. Well, with the Americano, you have an espresso, you add water, and once it mixes up, it's more clear at the top. The long black, it looks almost frothy, but not really frothy. Like, there's like a skim of white at the top that doesn't really cover the whole thing. It just looks like some kind of reaction was done, or some stirring or something, where it's not as clear on the top. And that's it. I mean, taste it. From what I hear, it tastes the same, and I would think so, because it's the same thing, same amount of water to the same amount of espresso. So, all right, this is concluding part one. All the rest of the types of coffees, the coffee drinks, is on the next one, unless I just add them together, edit this together, which I doubt, because it's a little lengthy now. But all right, see you next time, and hope that you go ahead and push subscribe. Look at my YouTube page. I have different videos on different topics, but they're categorized together so that it's easier for you. If you're food or restaurant type person, then it'll be in that folder. And hopefully I'll see you again. You can subscribe, but more than anything, just keep coming back every weekend. That'll make me happy.